Good morning, Mark. Well, it's afternoon. Sorry, I've made a mistake. I'm getting a bit confused because this is our third podcast today.
It is, and you're ringing in again. Why is that, Bill?
Yeah, well, I'm sitting at home in my T-shirt and shorts because I'm just recovering from COVID, or I have recovered, but my wife has now tested positive. So we've divided the house in two. We're living in opposite ends.
Yeah, well, welcome to
Be that as it
2024.
may, that's right. And it's interesting. This week, tomorrow in Geelong, we've got the Paco Fest, which I don't know if you've been to it.
Yep.
Michael, have you been to it?
I certainly have.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. And the packing in the street just around the corner from where I live will be absolutely packed. It's a great event for Geelong. It really is. It's become a signature event, as they call it.
Yep. So who's today's guest, Michael? Bill?
Yeah. Bill, Mark and Michael, yes. So you want to introduce our guest?
I'm happy to. I thought you might like to, but anyway, I will. So Michael Stefano, who's the director or managing director?
Managing director.
Managing director of Gartland and a number of other businesses, which we'll come to as we go through. But I first met Michael when he came on board the Chamber Board. We've just been saying 6 years ago.
Yeah, almost 6 years.
Almost 6 years ago. And I've always found Michael to be incredibly strategic in his thinking and a really nice guy. And he's gone on to do a Prop by the Bar video podcast, I suppose, which both you and I interestingly follow, and he's running a really good business. So welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Mark, and hope you're feeling better there, Bill.
Thank you. Listen, Michael, just out of interest, we did a podcast with Garrett Kent, your partner, Prime, on Prop by the Bar, and he's our highest performing podcast.
Oh, look out. So the pressure's on then.
We'll have to see if you can beat that.
The pressure's on.
We have a feeling he promotes it. So, Michael, the way we normally start is, where did you go to primary school?
I went to a primary school in Highton called Mercia that no longer exists. I think that's a housing estate now. It was on Thornhill Road. They amalgamated with St Bernard's and they're now Clairvaux. I left to go to St Joseph's College in grade 5 because they offered grade 5 and 6 back in those days. I'm showing my age. And so I was at St Joey's right through to year 12.
So while you were at St Joey's, did you have any vision of where you'd like to go? What was your career path?
I was going to be an architect.
Ah, okay.
All the way from a wee kid up until probably about halfway through year 12, sorry. And our next door neighbour was an architect and said, don't do it. There's no work around. So we're talking, this is 1998. And I think there was a little bit of there was a shortage of construction and whatnot back in the late 90s. My older brother, Vince, who's 4 years older, was in the IT industry, and it was just doors were opening everywhere in the IT industry. You could fall backwards into a job back then. So last minute, I changed my preferences to computer science.
At Deakin?
At Deakin.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And hated it. So it's probably I've got 2 children, and it's something that you got to be passionate, and you got to follow, I guess, what you enjoy and what you think you can do for a living, because you work for a long time.
Yep.
And I did 2/3 of a degree, and I just was like, I'm not going to do this for a living. It's not me. I don't enjoy it. I can do the extra year and get the certificate and put it in the drawer, but I'll never use it. So I quickly pivoted, I guess. There was, I think we were talking pre-recording about sliding door moments, and I guess that was one of them for me, not going into IT. Dad said, okay, what's the plan? And at that time I was working part-time at Harvey Norman. And I don't know if you're familiar with the setup with the Harvey Norman stores, but each department has its own franchise.
Yep.
And, they were making significant money back in those days. I was working in the computer franchise, and that's what I was going to do. I started a proprietorship and training program and I was going to be a proprietor. And Dad said, well, if that's what you've got a plan, go and do it. And quite quickly I was sort of going through that process well, but as Harvey Norman was getting bigger, it was kind of, they were, I don't want to say the words using, they're good people, but it was quite evident that it was like, you were based in Geelong, say, and you were doing well, and then they said, how do you feel about going to Dubbo? And you'd be like, I don't really want to go to Dubbo. How about you go to Dubbo? So it was sort of like a glorified manager, and they were sort of getting their people, their good people, to move to locations to lift the income there, and then moving them to somewhere else to improve a store. And I think people were getting a little bit jack of that, to say the least. And at the time, Harvey Norman bought Rebel Sport, and they were trying to implement the same way as, the business dealing and the profit share arrangement and all of that type of thing in Rebel Sport. So I was 22 at the time, and I was offered the manager's role up at Centrepoint Arcade in Burke Street.
Yep.
So I did the commute for about 14 months. Before that got a bit tiring and monotonous for me.
And it's interesting, if, my background, as you know, is retail, and I think back to that period, that was the way the retailers work. I remember friends who were Coles managers who were managing a store on Friday in, say, Geelong, and then were suddenly managing a store at Deer Park or Adelaide, and by the way, you start Monday.
Yep.
And that was seen as the given. These days, we wouldn't dare do that.
No, and they lost a lot of good people.
Absolutely.
A lot of the proprietors went and got involved in Good Guy stores at the time, because they just were jack of being, shipped here, there and everywhere. But it wasn't something that I then wanted to pursue. And I was always had, and I hate when people go, why do you want to get into real estate? Oh, I really like property. But I always did have that love of property, and I actually applied for a job at Gartland with Bob and Philippa Gartland at the time, and I had 3 interviews, and I was applying for a residential position, and I thought I got this in the bag, to get a call one afternoon to say, sorry to be the bearer of bad news.
Oh, no.
Lovely to meet you, but on this occasion you've been unsuccessful. And I went, right, okay. And then I got a call probably 2 days later from Bob that a commercial opening had come up, and what did I think about commercial? And I had not the slightest idea of what happened in the commercial market, but I was happy to go and have a chat to him. And long story short, I ended up being a leasing cadet in 2003 as a 23-year-old, and learnt the craft from Bob. So another, I guess, sliding doors moment. Had I probably got the residential position, I don't know if I'd be doing real estate today.
Yeah, okay.
And the commercial thing was me. It was more analytical, it was number driven, just a different way to operate. The two industries are poles apart in terms of how you navigate through them. And I think I just found my thing.
And interesting enough, you accepted the phone call saying sorry. You could have said, bugger you, I'm not going to work for you, I'm going off. Bob obviously saw something in you that thought, I want to have another chat with this young man.
So Bob ran the commercial and Philippa ran the residential at the time, and there was a bit of tongue-in-cheek because I did hit the ground running. I really loved it, and I think Bob had thought I was better suited for a role, and Philippa went a different direction at the time. But in terms of the way it turned out, things happen for a reason sometimes, and what was initially disappointment was it's turned out
really well.
Yeah.
Bill, anything you want to ask Michael?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. In fact, I listened to a podcast that Michael did only yesterday when I was doing my homework. But how long ago was that, Michael, that you actually started that job?
Bit over 20 years ago now.
So you're one of those rare people that have worked for the same business for 20-odd years in today's environment.
Yeah, so...
But of course, the difference is now you own it.
Yeah, so Look, and I guess my position, there's a lot of residential agencies, but Gartland was always a big 2 or 3 agencies in Geelong, so opportunities, I guess, to move more limited. But I never wanted to move. When at 23 years old, as I said, I've been offered this commercial role, and I remember my dad said, if anybody's going to teach you the business, it's going to be Bob.
Yep.
Well, you're the lucky one, in other words.
Yeah.
Because you've found your passion in life. You love what you do. But just take you back a bit. You spoke about franchising, and Mark and I both had experience in franchising. But I know that your business is getting bigger and bigger all the time, and that you're opening other offices. Will you end up following a franchise model in real estate?
Have you got my phone's bugged, Bill?
That's a good question, Bill.
Yeah, it is. As I squirm uncomfortably in my chair.
And he is squirming.
Yeah, look, there's a potential. So Gartland is trademarked, and we're actually, I'm not giving too much away, but we are in discussions with somebody that may be interested in going down that route. So, we are in the process of looking at an additional office for ourselves, and I haven't really been secretive about that. That will happen, and that's all.
No, but that's a good omen for if you do follow that a business model similar, that you've been on the other side and you've seen the worst of it all, and it can. And there's another interesting fact that Mark and I found out when we interviewed Emily Sim, who's the CEO of Ray White Property in Australia. We did a podcast with her, and she told us that Geelong is the highest proportion of individual real estate agents that she knows of in Australia. In other words, all the big franchises aren't here.
Non-franchise, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think how did that come about?
We've been approached by the franchises. We see things, and you can brandy, about knowing the Geelong market better and all that, but a lot of the franchises that come out of Melbourne and particularly Sydney. So I won't name names, but I've seen Sydney-based franchises that do stock boards, and they've got a picture of Bondi Beach, but they're selling a property in Geelong.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how well do you know this market? So Geelong intrinsically is a very different market to Melbourne, which is going to be a totally different market to Sydney. And we're not saying that we know better, but I think we know Geelong better. So what works better in this market, how to engage with people in Geelong, and having the local knowledge, I think, is more important to us than having the backing of a franchise.
One of the uniquenesses of doing business in Geelong is that it is Geelong. It's not Melbourne. It's not a capital city. And even though sometimes some people call us a suburb of Melbourne, southern suburb or whatever, but that's unique about Geelong, and it's got strong networks. That's the other thing I love about Geelong, is the strength of the networks.
Yep, and I think I not only have learnt that through, being a member of the community and running a business, but also being involved in the chamber as well. I think the chamber for me initially on was, when I got involved pre-board, was to sort of say, I'm here and I'm the new owner of this business, but you quickly learn about some of the outstanding businesses that exist in Geelong that you didn't know, and how good this business community is. And what I was sort of blown away is, as being a new kid on the block at the time, how supportive people are and want to see you have a crack and reward you for having a crack. So you don't get that in Melbourne. It's lost in a city of 5 or 6 million people, where we are very unique in that regard.
It's good. But Mark, just to comment, how we keep talking about sliding doors and all the rest of it. I got a question for Michael. It's called revolving doors. And I pinched this off an interview I heard him do. In the real estate agents, agent game, it is a revolving door game because people jump from agency to agency, and particularly in property management, which I think is the most difficult job in the world. So, Michael, you also have a number of long-term staff, and if anything, your door is not revolving. So how do you manage to keep the staff so long and so loyal?
I'm clenching onto a wooden table as we have this conversation. Look, I don't know if we've got like the magic touch, to be honest. Like I think we work in a great environment. I think it really comes down to recruitment. I'd rather keep a seat empty than just put someone on for the sake of doing it, and it can cause a little bit of strain if you're short-staffed, but it's the way we've always sort of done it. We've implemented a lot of stuff in terms of, because we are a small business, we have grown to 30 people now, but in terms of creating HR and amenity around that, we try to punch above our weight. So we do have, a collaboration with Upstate Yoga. We have mental health days. The amount of food and all that's brought into this office is astronomical, to be honest. There's always something in here. But in terms of, it really does come down to, I think, recruitment, and that's not something that's learnt overnight. This is 8 years for me in ownership, but in sense of, I've got some legacy staff that I recruited from the previous owner. So I'm 20 years. My office manager, Adam, is 18 years. A couple of my property managers are 17 and 16 years. My residential sales manager, I think, is 10 years. And we've got multiple people at 10 years plus. So it's, I feel blessed that that's the, because, and you grow close to people and whatnot, but I think, my line is the next person we employ is the most important person, because it only takes one to cause, to cause a ruckus.
Well, Bill, the question here, which you normally ask, but I'll ask Michael, is if we wandered around these offices and asked what your leadership style was like, what would they tell us?
Good question. I think it's changed, to be honest.
Changed or evolved?
Evolved. Yeah, it's evolved. So I was 35 when I took over the business and didn't like confrontation, didn't like to make the hard decisions. You try to be everyone's friend, but you can't be everybody's friend when you're running a business. So, it has evolved. Probably the best piece, one of the best things I did early on was I got a 360 report done on myself, where a consultant interviewed internal and external stakeholders.
Yeah, good.
And the theme that come back was the same. So it was stuff that I had to work on. But I think my staff would say that I'm flexible, fair, generous, and encouraging, and I'll back my staff as long as I feel they're doing the right thing. But I back my staff 100%. So I don't have staff issues.
Well, and culture starts at the top, Mike.
Yeah, but it's real estate's pretty cutthroat, and I haven't had to step into, particularly in residential, I haven't had to step into a situation where someone's claiming a client or claiming a commission over the other. These guys, they step in, they help each other at auctions, help each other at training, help each other, like in a way that when new people come to the business from other agencies, they're blown away and they buy into the culture as well. So, you do say it starts at the head, but everybody contributes to that. And, it's probably, you can talk about growth, you can talk about that, but I think in terms of how we operate internally is probably what I'm most proud of.
Very good. Bill?
So Michael, what do you do outside of work? how do you keep your mind sane from the daily grind of work?
I think he's refurbishing a car from the last conversation I had with him ages and ages ago.
Yeah, well, that is in the garage now. So I do have a couple of cars, but they get driven not nearly enough. I do have two boys, Lucas and Mason, are 15 and 11, and they're very competitive into sport. They play footy, they play basketball, but they also play rec basketball. So I'm off to Altona tonight for a game, and they're full of competitions and whatnot, so it takes you all over the state. So outside of work, there's a lot of sport. And really for me too, is probably my therapy is my exercise. I exercise every day. So that's the head clearer, and I do it in the morning. So when I come in at the start of each day, I feel good. So that's how I keep myself occupied outside of work, Bill.
So flipping back to, at what point, when did you decide I'm going to buy this business? What led to that?
There was always a discussion with Bob that I would buy a portion of the business. And, I was talking at the time 10% equity and whatnot. And that sort of hovered for a period of time. And then, like most things in life, it's sort of what's the perfect time? Never.
Yeah.
Bob's motivation, I guess, had changed, and he wanted to step out of the business completely. And so it was sort of put before me, do you want to buy the commercial business? So at the time, the business in its entirety was too big for me to buy it off in one piece. So it was actually sold off in two separate transactions. So I bought the commercial and inherited and employed all the commercial staff, and the residential business was sold elsewhere. So I moved the business to these offices in Little Mallow Street, which was a controversial move at the time.
And actually a really good location.
Yeah, well, it ended up being probably, in terms of that staff amenity and whatnot, it's
absolutely.
it's been one of the best things we've done. And we started residential from scratch. So when we moved in here in April 2016, we had 7 staff plus myself. And the idea wasn't to grow much bigger. I think I sat in my first year and I said, I think I'll cap out at 12 staff and just run a nice light team. And as we at 30 staff and we're talking in another office and whatnot, I'm like, what am I doing? But that's, I don't know, that's just how we're driven. And, if we can attract good people to our business, then we'll create those opportunities.
That's very good.
There's an interesting point there, Mark, in that, Mike, you said you moved into Little Mallow. Is that where you are?
Little Mallow.
Yeah. In a couple of past podcasts we've done with, for instance, the plan group, the building group, they've moved into an office in Mallow Street in the middle of the Green Spine, and they bought it and done it up and said they find that's a great location. And then we interviewing Nathan George at Pixel, and he's moved into his new office in Mallow Street as well.
Yep.
Around, probably not far from you. So
you should ask him who made him buy that too.
So no, I'm intrigued because at one stage I came back to Geelong about 7 years ago, and every companies have said, they were deserting the city, as you know. You know that better than I will ever know. But I'm really interested to see that these, what I call big small businesses, are making their way back into the city again.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. I think, where the city at the moment is, it's going to develop, and it's going to develop a lot. But to create the amenity, you need workforce, you need people living here. And when you get that underlying base, then it drives more investment into the city. And, we all live in this town, we all want good outcomes. So a good outcome is a vibrant city. And if you're part of the solution, not the problem, I think, as industry leaders, I think if we put our money where our mouth is and say, well, we're going to set up in the city because we think it's the best place to work, then, we hope that we are leading by example and others follow.
Michael, did you have a mentor as you went through all this? Was Bob your mentor quietly in the background? Or?
Not really, in the sense of yes and no. So I guess he was my mentor up until the point, and he hung around for probably about 4 or 6 months from the day I bought it to. But after that, like he was in the background if I needed, but he kind of was like, I think you've been with me for 13 years, so it's time to, set you free sort of thing. And, it was about not cramping style. He knew I had different ideas, would run it differently. The best thing about Bob, I was able to pick the eyes out of everything that I thought he did really, really well, and he made, tune-ups to stuff that I wanted to do different, and, that was probably more centred around branding. But, in terms of mentor, I think, I not really. There was other people in the industry that I was friends with, and I guess we would share stories and challenges, and it's a small community when you're a sole director, but it was sort of a learning on your feet type exercise, really.
Bill?
Yes, getting back to I guess the city of Geelong again, and we know that all those new buildings are going up and convention centres going up, which I think will be an absolute boomer. Mm-hmm. And I keep hearing, Geelong, as you know, when it comes to property and development, is a land of what I call talk fests. Everybody talks about it, and every day of the week you can go to a talk fest. How do you see I guess the dimensions playing out in that mix between residential and office accommodation in the centre of Geelong?
Yeah, good question, Bill. Look, we've probably been a little bit behind. Obviously COVID probably put a bit of a fly in the ointment in terms of development, and I guess a lot of development was halted as we're waiting on framework to be released. That came out May last year, which provided, I guess, the blueprint of what people can and can't do. So a lot of people waited on that. I think we're in a space at the moment where development, we've had the perfect storm in terms of, materials, labour, 13 interest rate rises. There's been a bit of development on hold because it inherently doesn't stack. But I think the period that we'll go through, probably next year onwards, I think we're going to see growth in the city that we haven't experienced before.
That's positive, isn't it? Because I also saw your Prop by the Bar episode where you went to the Holiday Inn.
Yep.
And I think that, from what I recall, the developer there put his backside on the line to get it off the ground.
Very much so. So he had to pivot pretty quickly with that building. He had a residence and a hotel tower, and he was going to do an office tower. Office during COVID was a bit on the nose, so he quickly went and widened out the lines there and turned it into apartments. And that, I think the conjecture there at COVID too was that it wasn't going to happen. This thing won't get built. And in talking to Paul, he, if I can say the word ballsy, but he made the decision, and it was very ballsy. He said, I'm just going to dig the basement. It was a multi-million-dollar hole to cut. And he said they will either stop the conjecture that it's going to happen, or I'm going to create the world's most expensive swimming pool. And to his credit, it stopped the chatter and people started buying. And that's fully sold out. I think we've all visited Holiday Inn in one way, shape or form, so if it's not the restaurant, or had a tour through. And I think it's the first proper hotel that's been built in Geelong for the last 20 years. So
well, that's somebody we haven't done a podcast with yet. We've done our friend up at the Quest Apartments.
Yep.
And that was lovely. Now, we're allowed to talk about the elephant in the room. It's called Prop by the Bar.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Mark, you could ask some questions.
So who drove it? Was it Gareth or yourself or?
Better explain what it is.
Yeah,
Well, I did hear Gareth's version of events, and I'll tell you the truth. So it was the beginning of COVID, and I think, we were all attuned to listening to the Today Show and Sunshine, and all your so-called experts were on there saying that property was going to fall by 30%. And what it meant to, we saw a scrambling of clients thinking they were, going to get in and sell their property just before it all went pear-shaped, and they'd sit on this nest egg and be able to buy in when the property market dove and all that. So there was a lot of questions being asked, and a lot of data being driven out of capital cities and not regionally. And John Fitzgerald, which you may I don't know, you guys are well acquainted with John, does some work with Gareth in a consultancy capacity, and they come up with an idea to do like a 5-minute market update during COVID. And then it sort of expanded, well, why don't we get an agent's perspective? So I got a call from John and said, would you like to be involved? I said, yeah, sure. And so we had a think tank in this boardroom that we're in now, and it sort of just got bigger and bigger and bigger as we discussed it. And it was like, well, we could sit in the boardroom and we could do like a panel style, and we can get some guests in, and then it evolved with, well, why don't we do sort of like a front bar type style? We'll do it at a bar with a beer and a bit more relaxed, and then Johnny Halmer's bar down the cellar door come up, and it just sort of evolved like that. And it actually makes me laugh. I've had a few people say if you go back and look at the first episode, I'll talk about myself, not Gareth, but it was very much deer in the headlights, and I think I was trying to read from an auto fronter, which it was very evident. And then we just got a bit more comfortable doing it. So it's we've been blessed with some, the willingness of guests to come on, and you're a guest, Mark, which we appreciated. And it's Geelong specific. It's a lot of stuff that and we're actually quite blown away. Like, the audience is generally 1,500 to 2,000, which doesn't sound a lot for a YouTube thing, but when you're talking about property that's Geelong specific,
it's good.
That's a lot of people that's listening to you. So when people say, "Oh, listen to your last episode," and who's your next guest and whatnot, it's like we've been blown away with what the complimentary fashion that we've received.
So if you're listening to this and you've never heard of Prop by the Bar, go onto YouTube and type in Prop by the Bar, and there'll be a whole scurry of episodes there, and they're all good. Every time they turn up, that's the first thing I listen to, and I really enjoy watching and listening to the chit chat.
And Michael's not the one that wears the tutu.
Nor will ever. Yeah.
And Michael's sometimes the one that looks uncomfortable. But anyway, they're very good. So to just sort of wrap up slightly, how do people get in touch with Gartland Property?
Yeah.
Website, obviously.
Yeah, website, direct phone call through socials. Socials is something that's, more and more people being more and more prevalent, but we're pretty easy to find, and a big part of why we set up in Little Mallow Street is that's where most people hang out now, is for wine or a coffee or a meal, is Little Mallow. So people really identify where we are by location now.
Cool.
So.
And briefly, the other little businesses that you've now grown into, chat about those.
Yeah, so there's two businesses that we've branched into. One is Gartland Projects, which is large-scale development, end-to-end sale. Big part of that was what we touched on before, is how we think Geelong's going to transform. I think the estimates now are 16,000 people living in inner city Geelong by 2030 or 2032. So there's going to be a lot of development, and we are a business that's residential, commercial, industrial, sales, leasing and management. And this has just opened up our door to basically every corner of the market. So there's not a bit of the market we don't touch now. So again, the development space, we can see what's bubbling in the pipeline, and that's what really excites us. But the off-market in global shopping centres, large parcel stuff that we're getting as well, it gives our clients as well the opportunity to market their property to 100% of the market. And yeah, it's exciting to see, like, if you can fast forward to see where we're going to be, I think I'm really excited by that. And the other thing that sort of dovetails but's branched off into another little avenue is Affiliate Studios, which is a marketing agency that we've started. And it all born from frustration of rebranding ourselves and having to really be heavily steer the agency in the direction that we wanted, and we saw opportunity to do it for others. And initially we started doing it for our own brands for property, which each business acts as a conduit for more business for the other. So if we get a development, there's generally resales, and that feeds back into our residential business. Affiliates helping us win development work, but development work's helping us get work for affiliate. But the affiliate team, we have our own digital strategists, videographers, cameramen, graphic designers, whatnot. It's grown into its own little beast there, but we're doing a wide range of work for car industry, beauty industry, hospitality, fitness. It's actually started to grow in a fashion that I probably didn't envision, but I think there's goodwill in the synergy in terms of our branding, and it's opened our eyes to vast opportunities as well. So
I think Michael's got a new title now, Bill, entrepreneur.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, I've just opened, while he's talking, I just opened up the website for Affiliate Studios, and I'm thinking, I've been looking for some marketing services. I might have to give him a call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Phone's always on, Bill.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think I sort of said to you previously, Mark, it's a business that's, I'm not a marketing expert, but the people we've got working are, and I sit as the strategist, but it's all work that really excites me because it's all creative. And again, we're getting insights to all these businesses in Geelong that you wouldn't have known otherwise. And again, it just brings you back to, how many good businesses there are in Geelong and what some people are doing. Yeah.
Well, I'm just reading quickly off your website under Affiliate Studios: branding, graphic design, video and photos, social media, digital advertising. So you are a full-blown agency.
Yeah, one-stop shop. And that's what a lot of people have been attracted to. It's not like, well, we can put all this together, but you need to go and get your own video done, or your own, which most agencies do. They can come here and we'll complete the task from, A to Z. So it's...
Well, I think that's great. Look, who would have known when you first walked in there and told, no, you can't have this job, that you'd end up where you are today. And I gather, listening to you, that this is not the end of it. There's more to do.
There is more to do. I think we're invigorated, and I think I'm excited by the opportunities we're creating for our own people. So we've got guys that I know that work here today that will be involved in a higher capacity in the business in years to come, and we're creating, a legacy for them as well. So I guess that's what probably excites and motivates me too now. So, we've got good people, want to look after them.
Michael, thank you. It's fantastic to hear your journey, and actually you've got me really excited about where you're heading. So it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Well, thanks for having me on, and look after yourself, Bill. Hope you're recovering well.
Thank you, Michael. Great to talk to you.
Likewise. Thanks, Mark.